What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode here of the Juicy GG podcast. Joining me today, TechChariot. Hello, sir.
Hey, Juicy, thanks for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to talking about my favorite strategy game of all time, Axis and Allies.
Yeah, a game that I've looked into a little bit since we kind of started talking about this, but not something that I'm really all that familiar with. I played Risk, and this kind of reminds me of Risk, but otherwise, an interesting game for sure. But you said it's one of your favorite games, then?
It is. And look, Juicy, I was in Boy Scouts for many years. I went on the campouts and stand in the lodge. I remember every year in December we would go to Greek Peak and we'd go skiing during the day. But then, since it was December in New York State, around 4:30, 5 o'clock, it started to get too dark to go skiing anymore at the resort. That's what it was called, was Greek Peak Ski Resort. So we'd come in and we'd cook our Boy Scout dinner, which took like half an hour to an hour. And then there was this big period of time. We were all in this beautiful ski lodge. And of course, the ski resort let the troops stay in that lodge because they wanted the troop to come and spend money on their lift tickets, right?
Sure.
And we'd have this big block of time between like 6 until midnight where there was nothing to do. So the staple was always Risk. We'd get a big Risk game set up. We have, however many people can play Risk, I think 7 people.
Yeah.
And we would draw lots and we would randomly assign starting locations and put down the starting armies, and we just have a great time. There'd always be that guy that felt that if he controlled all of Australia, that he could snowball it into controlling the world. He'd like hide up in Australia.
Oh, that's me.
But I always thought it'd be really ridiculous.
That would be me all the way.
Every time you conducted battle and you took a territory, you got one of these Risk cards.
Yeah.
And if you accumulated one of each or 3 of the same, you could turn those Risk cards in for bonus armies. So there'd be this guy that had like 4 guys left. Four little infantry in his corner of the world, and he suddenly turns in Risk cards at the end of the game and has 50 armies. And he just spreads out and takes over the world. Let me give you a fair bit of warning. That doesn't happen in Axis and Allies.
Fair enough.
It was still a lot of fun, but I always found myself wondering, what could I do in a world domination strategy game where luck was less of a factor? Where if you got holed up and you gave up the entire world and you were confined to a single small obscure place on the continent, that would generally mean that you were eliminated, right? Where the rules of war and combat more closely mirrored what we saw through history, and that game is Axis and Allies.
Gotcha. So this game has been out for a long time. It's gotten a couple of different editions, it looked like, whenever I was looking up the game, and it has obviously came to the online platform. As someone who played it as a board game, how do you feel that it translates onto online play?
Yeah, like you said, there are many different versions. I started out with the board game. I had a friend whose father owned Axis and Allies. He'd bring it over after high school, and we and a bunch of friends would play, and there were 5 factions, and that was the 1942 original version. Mm-hmm. And then there were other versions since then. I got the 1940 Europe and Pacific versions, which take up a massive table. It's like 4 feet long and 2 feet wide or something like that, full of units. Hundreds of pieces easily, but ultimately they decided to go with the most popular version to convert into a computer game that's available on Steam, Axis and Allies 1942 Online. And I have to say, Juicy, that it is just like I remember from high school. It's just like the board game, and I'm very pleased with how it's done. There are a lot of quality of life improvements that make it easier to play. And it's nice because you can take your turn much more efficiently, even if you're not that great at math or don't 100% know what you're doing, because there are some of the rules are just baked into the way that the game is set up electronically in Steam.
For sure, which makes sense. Obviously, it's come along long way, and I feel like if they've made it feel that it is like the board game and just made quality of life changes, that really keeps like the essence of the game from like childhood memory alive. So I think that's really important for them to do. So with this game, how do you get into the game here? Like today, like you got it up here for us on your screen. So like, can you show us a little something about the game on how you would like go about playing it yourself?
Oh, certainly, Juicy. I could demonstrate. So this game is developed by Beamdog, which I believe is a Montreal-based video game developer.
Okay.
And I believe that they partnered with the company that owns Axis and Allies, officially owns it, to develop this and make sure that it's true to that board game experience. So a big disadvantage for Axis and Allies is that you've got different types of units in different territories, and not everybody starts with the same stuff. So there can be a lot of time spent setting the game up and making sure that you have the right number of infantry and artillery and tanks and all that in different places. And when you do it electronically, it's already set up for you.
Yeah, that makes a big
So
deal, I bet.
it saves time, and it turns what could be a very long game into just a long game. So yeah, let me show the map here.
Yeah, I
We'll
mean,
click on
let's take a look.
single player. We'll create a game. So it's important to know that this is like Risk, except there are 5 different factions, just like the 1942 second edition. Germany, Japan as the Axis against the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States, who are the Allied powers. And your viewers might be thinking, okay, well, that's 2 versus 3. That's not very fair, right? And indeed, it's probably not very fair, but of course, those were really the only 2 factions, aside from Italy, perhaps, on the Axis power against the Allies. But this has been a little bit simplified. And what they need to know is that the Axis are just a little bit more powerful on average than the Allies, at least starting the game out.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the starting scenario is the 1942 second edition, but there was also a Larry Harris Gen Con 3.0, which was some modification that was made to the game that was popular to a bunch of people. Larry Harris is the name of the designer of the original board game, Axis and Allies. So victory conditions standard, meaning that the game is decided by control of victory cities. And the dice, Juicy. This is the most important setting right here. The dice mode being standard. Very, very, very important. If you're playing with your friends, don't ever play on bias dice or even low luck dice.
All right.
You want the standard dice, and here's the reason why. When you play with your friends, there is a very good chance that half of the people you're playing with are going to lose. So if you have dice mode standard, then that will allow the losing team to blame the dice, which is super important.
All right. Sounds good.
So we will pick standard here, and I'll just kind of show the map now.
All right.
Start the campaign. So bias dice just means that the dice are more likely to roll 2s, and more likely than rolling 2s will be to roll 3s or 4s, which are more likely than rolling 5s, which are more likely than rolling 6s. So it gives almost like a bell-shaped curve to the probability of getting different numbers.
Gotcha.
So we'll start. You must select a power to continue. Okay. Well, we'll play as America.
Sounds good.
So we're kind of watching the AI take its turn here. The AI is playing as the USSR. Everyone really is AI except for me. I should have picked the USSR so that we wouldn't have to watch all of this. But as you can see, you basically just click on the unit and you right-click, and it will tell you that you're sending different units to different places. So in this case, the AI has decided that he is going to attack West Russia, this territory here, and Ukraine SSR. And so based on the results of that combat, there will be different dice rolls, and it looks like he failed to take the Ukraine SSR. And now he's doing a non-combat move, which you're entitled to do after your combat. And that's where you can shuffle units around that haven't moved yet and use them to reinforce places. Then, at the end of his turn, he mobilizes his new units and collects his income. So now it's Germany's turn. Germany's going to fight back. They're going to attack Egypt. They're going to do all of these maneuvers. I think it's pretty intuitive for your viewers to see on the screen at least what's going on. And it almost looks like you're watching a map of World War II play out, except obviously there's luck involved in the dice, so it may not work out exactly the way that the history writes it.
Yeah, for
But
sure. No, this looks really, really interesting. I'm curious how the AI does work. So,
well, yeah, and this is kind of a little bit out of order here. We can explain the mechanics of behind what's going on. You can see that when he takes the territory like Karelia, for example, went from being red to blue. This is now under his control. And Karelia has one of this flag in it, which means that it is a victory city, and it has what's called an industrial complex. So in Risk, you can place units in any territory that you control. In Axis and Allies, you can only place units in a territory that has an industrial complex. Additionally, you have the concept of a capital in Axis and Allies, which, if your enemies take control of your capital, you are essentially removed from the game. You can't place any new units. In Risk, there are no capitals, so it makes defending your capital much more important, kind of like real life.
yeah, no, it's definitely, I like that aspect. It definitely adds another element to the game that makes it very interesting.
Okay, so Germany had a pretty successful turn. They took Karelia SSR and they took Egypt from the United Kingdom. So now the United Kingdom, and I don't know why the AI does this. They decide that we're going to go attack this destroyer off the coast of China, and they're doing some other things with their fleets in the Pacific that I don't really agree with. But that's just the AI's intelligence for you. It's actually usually quite competent. It's just it has a really weird first turn as the United Kingdom.
No, I mean,
All right,
any
let's take
any
point now.
AI is kind of interesting. So, no worries there. So now it's your turn, yes?
It's almost my turn. They're still going. So you can tell what turn it is because there are brackets around this target roundel here.
Okay.
So the brackets up here indicate that it is the United Kingdom's turn. So first is the USSR, and then Germany, and then the United Kingdom, and then Japan will go, and then America goes. Just kind of simulate the fact that America did not want to be in this war for the longest time.
No, for sure.
So now the UK is mobilizing. They'll put troops in India, and they'll put troops in their capital because those are the only two territories in which they have an industrial complex. You can build more industrial complexes, but some industrial complexes that you build in different places may not yield as many units. For example, if you build an industrial complex out here in the middle of nowhere in French West Africa, the number of units that it can place is equal to the value of the territory. So it's just one. So you'd only be able to build one unit at a time out of it. You have money in this game. That's where I'm getting at. You've got money, and in Risk, there is no money. It's just a number of armies that you can place. But in Axis and Allies, it's money, and different units are worth different amounts of money. The money in Axis and Allies is called Industrial Production Credits, or IPCs. And
Gotcha.
your income of these is the summation of all the territories that you control. So Western Canada, Eastern Canada, that gives the UK 4. The UK's home territory of the United Kingdom is 8, so that's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20. You get the idea. You add up all the territories that they control. That's why there's such an incentive to take as many territories as you can,
Yeah.
because the more territories you control, the more your income is. All right, perfect. So here we are. We're on our first turn is America. We have 42 IPCs to spend, and these 42 IPCs, as I explained, are the sum of the value of all of our territories. Our territories are generally not that many. Like the United Kingdom is spread all across the world, but our territories are more valuable. We've got one worth 10, one worth 12, one worth 6, and so that is our mainland right there. We have the bulk of our IPC income. So these different tabs represent the different options that we have to buy different units. We could buy an industrial complex for 15 IPCs, and that industrial complex we would place in a territory that doesn't have one, and we could use it to continuously put down units in that location. But we have to be careful because if we build an industrial complex in a territory and our enemy takes it, then our enemy will then control that industrial complex, even though we were the ones that invested in building it.
Yeah, makes sense.
So land units, we've got infantry, artillery, tanks, and anti-aircraft artillery, the 3 different types of unit. Sea units, we've got submarines, transports, destroyers, cruisers, aircraft carriers, and battleships. And air units, we have fighters and bombers. So I guess let's start with the different types of land units here, because these are all important in their own way. So you'll notice that these units have like a different attack and a defense value and a movement. So have you ever found that when you were playing Risk, you were really bad and you could never get 6s, and so you would lose these ridiculous fights that you should have won?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, you would be really good at Axis and Allies then.
Well, I mean, it's definitely interesting. It's definitely a lot of information. But I see what you see with the different attacks, defense, the movement speeds, all that, which is very interesting. I like the change here with having those industrial complexes too. That's definitely interesting. Having some sort of currency definitely changes the game a little bit. That makes it kind of interesting as well. It's kind of strange, but it's definitely interesting. Someone coming from Risk seeing this definitely feels similar. A lot of information, though, that I feel like if this game went to late game, I'd probably have like a good grasp about how things work. Obviously, we're not going to get quite there today, but so obviously, lots of interesting mechanics so far that we've seen. And lots of interesting things to look at here on the screen itself. So you guys used to play this on the board game, though. So in comparison, this is nicer for quality of life. It's easier, faster. It's much easier to have played a game. With the board game, is this a very similar gameplay style? You can get these different types of military units. The dice rolls, obviously just like an in-person dice roll. But is that pretty similar with all infantry, artillery, tanks, and so on?
Yep. It's exactly the same. And the reason why I say you would be good at Axis and Allies is because in Axis and Allies, you want to roll a low number. That's your whole thing. So when we say in Axis and Allies that an infantry attacks on a 1, that means that if you have an attacking force that consists of infantry, the infantry will score a so-called hit and do damage to your opponent if you roll a 1 for every infantry that you have. If you don't roll a 1, if you roll anything higher than a 1, those infantry will not deal damage. So it might not seem like a big deal, but other units, such as strategic bombers, attack at 4. So a strategic bomber that is part of an attacking force will score a hit on a 4 or less, which is a 66% chance on a 6-sided die.
Mm-hmm.
So that rule only applies when the infantry are attacking. When the infantry are defending, they will score a hit on a 2 or more. And infantry, so that's twice as good.
Yeah.
Infantry cost 3, which means that they are the cheapest unit that you can buy. So it's easy to have a lot of infantry. And a popular strategy for players is to attack with a big mass of infantry, maybe 10 infantry or something, and then have a bomber or 2 to actually deal the damage. So if you had an attacking force of 10 infantry and 2 bombers, even though the infantry have really terrible attack statistics, you can rely on those infantry absorbing the damage that your opponent deals, while the bombers deal damage to your opponent as the infantry are dying. The infantry might not be adding much to the attack in terms of damage output, but they're very important because they are what take the hits that your opponent scores, and they allow your bombers to survive and continue doing damage.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense.
So the game is designed to reward combined arms, the idea that you would attack with a variety of units. And there are different rules to reward that as well. For example, if an infantry attack with an artillery, each infantry that has an artillery attached to it will attack at a 2 instead of at a 1 normally. Artillery attack and defend at 2, but their cost is 4. So it's not just about having the most powerful units out there. It's about taking cost-effective fights and unfair fights. It's a lot like Age of Empires in that sense. The more unfair the fights are that you can take, and the more damage that you can do to your opponent, the better off that you will be. So we look at the incomes here. Let me look at the war report. I believe it'll summarize the number of territories that each player controls. It'll summarize their industrial production credits that they get per turn, and it'll summarize their IPCs that they have in the bank and their attack power, which is not really. It's just kind of a sum of all of the attacks of different units. So for every bomber you add 4, for every tank you add 3, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. No, it's definitely.
And
I like this.
so
This is very
even
clean.
though the Axis, let's say, might have an income disadvantage compared to the Allies, because the Axis generally start with more units from having built up all these years before the war broke out, let's say. Because they start with more units, they can pick unfair fights and achieve an exchange rate that puts them at parity with the Allies. So even though they are not spending as many IPCs, they don't need to, because they're using their initial numbers advantage to make the Allies suffer heavy casualties, and therefore they can keep up just fine. Now, there's all kinds of strategies that we could go into. I'm not necessarily going to do that. I'm just going to kind of, if you don't mind, take like a first turn and explain everything that I'm doing on that first turn without too much regard to strategy, just so that folks can see the mechanics. And then if we make an attack, which I think we should, it will demonstrate how that works out.
For sure, yeah.
So in this case, we're just in the purchase phase, which means that we started with a certain amount of money. It's 42 IPCs. We have the capacity to put down at most 22 units because we have a factory with a 12 and a factory with a 10, so the sum of that is 22. So we could buy only infantry, we could buy a bunch of ships. None of these units that we buy will be able to participate in combat this turn, so we sort of have to plan ahead. And just for the action, we are gonna invade Morocco here to show your viewers and listeners. Well, not really show your listeners; they can follow along in the audiobook, I'm sure. But we're gonna invade Morocco to get some action in, and we'll probably invade something in the Pacific too. Maybe we'll pick a fight with the Japanese fleet somewhere. If it doesn't look like they're in range. Oh well. So we're gonna buy what we think we're gonna need. And so the United States, we got a two-front war here. So I say let's buy ourselves a submarine. We'll buy ourselves a battleship. This is all totally arbitrary because we're not really gonna be using it. But buy ourselves a transport ship, and then we'll buy. Actually, no, scrap the transport ship. We'll buy ourselves some infantry and 2 infantry, and we'll buy ourselves a fighter. All right. So notice how easy that was. I don't have to go through and do mental math in my head and say, how much is 2 infantry, a submarine, a battleship, and a fighter worth? I don't have to add up all those costs. The fighter's worth 10, the battleship is worth 20, so that's 30. The submarine is worth 6, so that's 36, and each infantry is worth 3, times 2 is 6, so 36 plus 6 is 42. Boom. Done. It's there. So you don't have to figure that out, and likewise, you don't have to keep track of whether or not you're breaking your industrial complex rules, because it does that for you. So now we're going to press hold, and we're going to confirm that we want to spend these 42 IPCs on these 5 units here. So then we'll go to the next phase. Combat move. So this is where we declare everything that we want to attack this turn. So it looks like there is a Japanese cruiser here in Sea Zone 53, so we definitely want to fight that. So we're going to send our battleship here. We are going to load some infantry up onto this transport ship, and we're going to move our transport, and we're going to offload it here. And this is Wake Island, so we're going to take that, and we could have the destroyer come and help out, but I don't think we're going to. We've got a fighter here that can't really do anything. This fighter can't really... you know what? We'll have this fighter attack here, and we'll have this fighter attack here. And that's the beauty of it, is you can change your mind. So These two infantry are really not going to win this fight over here at all. Infantry are terrible attackers. So what we'll do is we will, instead of having this battleship fight this cruiser, we can come over here and we can cancel this battleship's movement. And we can send this battleship here to this sea zone and then right-click and have the battleship bombard. You can only bombard if you're doing an amphibious assault. And bombardment means that because you've got guys running up a beach to attack somebody, their guys come to the beach to fight, and that's where your big battleship's guns blast them to smithereens. So this is our combat in the Pacific. Can't reach anything with this cruiser, and oh, this destroyer we're going to have attack that cruiser. Because destroyers are easier to replace than planes are. So now we will load some units onto this transport, and we will come over here, and we will attack this spot, this territory in Morocco. Normally I would not do this because we're going to be leaving a destroyer and 2 transport ships here, and it'll be very easy for Germany to counterattack and come over here with its planes and sink it. But I'll just do this just for fun. So we've got a bomber, which we're going to add to the fight. And I'm going to load a tank onto this transport ship and an artillery piece and these 2 infantry. A transport can transport an infantry and 1 other land unit. And then we will click and right-click over here, and then we're sending 5 units over here to Morocco. So we should be able to take Morocco just fine. Now, our bomber can move six squares, so it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the bomber will have to land in Gibraltar. Bombers are pretty defenseless, but the good news is that we have a fighter that can go 1, 2, 3, 4, and land in Gibraltar and protect him. So in World War II, Gibraltar was actually a very important strategic bombing platform, both for Rome and for Berlin. And that is the case in this game as well. Bombers in Gibraltar can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they could actually strategically bomb the factories in Germany or in Rome. In Italy, I mean. So there we go. That's the extent of our combat moves. So now we'll click and hold this. Oh, wait. We'll make some changes. So we have some units in China here, but I'm not going to do anything with them, actually. Japan is too strong. These represent like Chinese resistance fighters, and it's more advanced in other games. So it says it'll even help you out a little bit and say, you have a strong chance of winning this. It says our fight against Wake Island is implausible, and it's probably true, but we'll do it anyway because you can't win everything in life. So we'll show what a defeat looks like. And Morocco, it says we have a strong chance of winning as well. So again, this is not really a good first turn as America. You don't have to fight anything your first turn as America. And in many cases, you probably shouldn't. But this will kind of demonstrate what's going on here. So we will go to combat here. It says your army is attacking Wake Island. So, bombardment. The attacking ships roll now. So the battleship gets to attack. So we click Start Combat. And the battleship rolls a 1, and it kills this infantry. So that's an infantry that our battleship scored a hit on, and that's 1 fewer infantry that our infantry that only attack at 1 have to kill. So it's quite nice. So our infantry miss, that infantry misses, and the plane hits. So the plane gets a kill. So because the plane hit, we have to casualtize an infantry because it's all we have. So we'll hit continue. So the dead units are then removed. We can't retreat because it's an amphibious assault. Could you imagine the Marines being like, oh, sorry, our bad, and getting back on the landing ship and leaving? Nope. We fight to the death. Okay, so this plane got another hit, and this infantry has to take that hit and is removed. So we finish, and the result is that we are defeated. The defender lost a single IPC, or a single infantry, which is worth 3 IPCs, and we lost 2, which is worth 6. So we close combat. So now we'll go to our next battle, and that is over Morocco here. So in Morocco, we've got an infantry that is not attacking with an artillery, and an infantry and an artillery, a tank, and then a bomber. So our infantry, holy crap, that was not supposed to happen, Juicy. But we got some really good luck attacking, so every single unit from the roll, as you saw, got below the threshold required to score hits. So that's 5 hits total. So our defender is going to have to distribute 5 hits among his 3 units. So in other words, he's dead. So he's going to roll a retaliatory strike, and we'll just casualtize this infantry here. And hit finish. So we won that one pretty decisively. We killed 2 infantry and an artillery, so that's 6 plus 4, which is 10 IPCs, and we only took 3 IPCs worth of damage. All right, and then now let's do the naval combat, which is quite fun. So we'll start combat here. We got a destroyer and we got 2 planes, and the planes indeed score a hit against this cruiser. Now cruisers attack and defend at 3, so therefore 3 was all it needed to score hits. So we have to casualtize this destroyer. And that destroyer and that cruiser go away. The difference is that it cost us 8 IPCs and it cost him 12, because cruisers are worth 12.
Gotcha.
But
Yeah.
had we not been attacking with those planes, there's a very good chance that he would have beaten us, because our destroyer only attacks and defends at a 2. They're like the infantry of the ocean. So now we do our non-combat moves. We want to move our destroyer up here to protect these transports, although that protection is ultimately insufficient. We're going to move a fighter to Gibraltar, and we're going to move this bomber to Gibraltar. And we'll move this infantry over to the east coast. We've got 2 fighters here, which I guess we could land. And this cruiser we could move up to this sea zone. And I think that's pretty much it. We're probably just going to leave this here. Honestly, he could kill that pretty easily. We don't have the ability to reinforce out there.
Gotcha.
So then we'll go to the next phase. We'll see that our units that did not attack are shuffled around now. And now we can mobilize. So we can put our submarine here, our battleship over here, our fighter, let's say here, and our 2 infantry over here. And then hold to end turn. And bam, that's it. So we gained 41 IPCs because somewhere we lost a territory that was worth 1. And I think it was this one right here. It was Anhui. So now the AI will go and take their turn. And we're just going to watch a little bit, and you guys can see the consequences of these decisions. Like, the AI will certainly attack these transport ships. Look, he may not have any ships that can reach them, but he's got planes, and planes can attack ships. So these are some of the consequences of the decisions that are made. He's also making a big all-out attack on West Russia. And there are different advantages and disadvantages to playing as the different factions. If you play as the USSR, it's pretty simple, but it's also really hard. All you got to do is make infantry and basically survive. You don't have to deal with planes really much. You don't have to deal with ships at all. But you've got a really hard existence because Germany is bigger and tougher than you. And you really need the UK and America to keep Germany busy, at least in part on one side, so that you can survive. But as you can see, these planes very easily killed my destroyer, and then there was nothing left protecting the transports. So these units are stuck here, and I'll have to make some more transports to send more units over or bring these ones somewhere else.
Makes sense. Cool. Well, we kind of get an idea how the game works. We've seen the phases and everything. A lot of interesting things. If people are interested, we believe this game is on Steam. I think it's on even the Google Play Store. A lot of different places you can pick it up if you are interested. Yeah, definitely interesting. I might have to check it out. I might have to give this one a couple playthroughs. But yeah, it's definitely a fun little game that I feel like has some strategy to it and some mechanics that are fairly simple to learn. So definitely curious to see how it would play out, obviously late game. But other than the victory cities here, there's another type of victory or anything, or is it just is that standard?
Yeah. So victory cities is the standard victory type.
Okay.
Other than that, it's world domination. So if you eliminate all territories that are controlled by your opponent, that is another way to win. And the reason that is an option is because, hey, you know what? Sometimes people don't care about St. Petersburg up here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you want to play a game with your friends where St. Petersburg doesn't matter. And decisions about what territories to attack are not made around that territory. Some people like to set their own victory conditions. So you can see that Japan is counterattacking our battleship here. So we'll follow the player. Maybe we'll get to see the combat. Oh, it's too late. I hit it too late. So we'll see if our battleship wins. Battleships are unique because they can take 2 hits instead of 1. But I wanted to say, yeah, I really like this game. I think it's reasonably priced. I think there also might be some like unofficial, cheaper versions of it on the internet as well. If folks are kind of interested in checking it out but don't necessarily want to buy the game, I don't think they're as like user friendly as this one is, but there's still an electronic version, so it's still a simplification. And obviously, if you've ever played the board game, then you'll have a really good idea of whether or not you want to want to get this if you've got the time for it. But
Yeah.
I used to stream Axis and Allies 1942 online, and it was a good time. But I haven't done so in a while because we had a group. So here we are. We can see. Okay, they scored a hit on us. We can see their turn by following player. We can see that in a little bit more detail. So my battleship is destroyed, and it took nothing with it. So that was a really good fight for them. Um, anyway, I used to stream this and explain why I was doing everything that I was doing, and it was fun because it was all human players. We haven't had an all human player Axis and Allies game out of the ViridArx server in a very long time. So if you or anybody you know is interested in playing this game with some real people who are like nice and won't make fun of them and stuff like that, and who will actually find time to talk strategy because it's so much fun. Like I remember my brother would be texting me. He'd be like, "Hey, did you see Ebenezer took his turn?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Yeah, really lucky bombing run on my capital and stuff like that." And I'd be like, "All right, we'll talk about it and decide what to do." But you can take it as seriously as you want it, and you can have as much fun as you want. I think it's a lot of fun, and I think what the game does really well, it's well designed in the sense that it makes you feel like the military leaders in World War II felt. All the different production capacity, all the locations of enemy troops and their capabilities. It's designed to make you feel, if you're playing as a certain faction, how the military leaders of that faction felt. Put yourself in their shoes, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely interesting. We'll have to see. Might have to check it out myself here a little bit more. But back to the points you made here. You used to stream this game. You do stream. You're now over on YouTube. Uh, you're running a clan, or I guess you have the VividArx clan. How have you been enjoying the streaming life over there at YouTube, Ben?
I like YouTube. It's a little bit different. The setup is more in line with what I want to do with streaming. I know that Twitch has a pretty like Twitch has an excellent setup for small streamers. There's no doubt about it. The ability to subscribe to a streamer, support a small streamer, is non-trivial and it's important to many of them. But it's not really something that I'm interested in. So I'm over on YouTube and I prefer that setup. It doesn't seem to have as many views, but it's still fun, and I think there will reach a point in which YouTube will be more impactful than Twitch. I think Twitch's impact is pretty, like the amount of time that you're on Twitch and the amount of effort that you put into it is pretty linear. But I think YouTube, it starts out quite slow, and then there's this point in which people discover you and you rapidly gain viewership and following. And I don't think I've reached that yet, but I've got that on my horizons.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll put all the links in the description. Put your Discord in there as well. That way, if anyone is interested that's listening or watching wants to check it out, you guys can head over there to tell them that you came from the Juicy GG podcast. Tech Chariot, man, it's a lot of fun to see this game. I know you play a lot of Age of Empires, and you have like a Civilization like 5, I believe you're playing like every week with your clan. Um, is that what you guys are still on Civ 5? Or what are you playing over there? Civ 5, Civ
We
6?
we do have a Civ 5 game going. It's not. I think I'm one of two people in the clan that are playing right now. Most of them are not in the clan, but it is still part of the community. So yeah, we do Civ on Thursday nights though, and that's a lot of fun. Civilization 5. And we would do Axis and Allies if we had the people for it. And of course, there is a lot of Age of Empires too. So,
Yep, back to the
very.
game we all love and play around here. But yeah, man. Is there anything that you guys are looking to do, like other than Axis and Allies, Age of Empires, Civ 5? Anything you'd like to share? If not, no pressure.
Not right now. I will put a little bit of a teaser out and say that we're considering a tournament for the end of the year for Age of Empires, but we have yet to formally, determine any prize or the conditions of the such a tournament would be. So there will be some activity. I think our biggest right now is to see if we can backfill, and because we're down an officer right now, to see if we can find someone that will step up for that. But I still have to talk to Ebenezer, who's our other officer, and decide what we want to do.
Cool. Well, I mean, can't wait to see what comes from you guys. I know I've been pretty busy, haven't been able to play any games or anything lately, but I do appreciate that you're inviting me all the time. Lots of casting going on, as you know, for my own tournaments. But yeah, man, it's been fun to have you on this podcast. Hope you've enjoyed. Hope you guys, all the listeners are out there, will go check out his Discord and YouTube channel. Like I said, it'll be linked down below. I mean, we have a lot about the game that we discussed on this one. A little bit about TechChariot and what he's doing right now. Any questions for me, man?
Juicy, when are we going to play Axis and Allies together?
We'll see.
No pressure. I don't want to pressure you on TV or anything like that. But
no,
again,
I'm definitely.
When I say anyone's welcome to join us, I don't just mean that to be nice. Like we've actually, this is something we've been talking about for a long time. So if anybody thinks that they're interested in this, it would be absolutely our delight and pleasure to teach them how to play and show them how to play and get some Axis and Allies content rolling again. So we really appreciate what I hope is going to be a little bit of a Kickstarter here and help us try to find some folks that are interested.
Yeah, I mean, I have some big things coming up. You may or may not have heard about a few of them. Big announcements coming. So we'll see. Time will tell. But definitely something I'm going to have to probably pick up and play a little bit. So we'll see if we can get that going here before too long, man. Would be fun for sure.
Yep. No worries, Juicy. Thanks for the chance to talk about Axis and Allies. It brings me back to happy times when life was less complicated. When you were driving into your camp out, and instead of thinking about paying bills and stuff like that, you were thinking about how much fun you were going to have playing Risk or Axis and Allies. So.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, man. That's what it's all about. Thank you guys for listening. This is another episode here of the TechChariot on the Juicy GG podcast. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe. Go like, follow, and subscribe TechChariot and his channel as well. And you guys have a good day. See ya.